Our story begins in a place of great power and beauty, at the very heart of the galaxy's government, the Celestial Conclave. Try to imagine this amazing building. It's a giant structure, made of shiny metal and bright clear crystal towers that reach incredibly high into an alien sky. It stands like a huge jewel in space, catching the golden light from the two suns of its home planet and sending out dazzling reflections everywhere. Around this main building, which is like the center of all galactic order, you can see whole fleets of spaceships. Each one is a masterpiece of design, moving with a calm, dream-like grace like a school of shiny fish floating through the water. Some are sleek and fast, built for quick trips. Others are artistic and flowing, made for talks between worlds or for trading goods. They move together smoothly, showing thousands of years of different species working side by side. But maybe, just maybe, they also show how comfortable and safe everyone has become, how they've almost forgotten about danger. This grand place was built not just to rule, but to fill you with wonder, to tell its countless citizens that peace would last forever, and to quietly show that the old strong ways of power were still in charge. Inside the Conclave's grand debate chamber, which is like the very soul of this huge galactic body, leaders and representatives from more than 500 different kinds of species come together. It's a breathtaking meeting hall, a truly vast round space that seems to stretch endlessly upward. All around its walls are tall, curved screens showing live information from all over the galaxy. Every blinking light, every moving graph on these screens is like a beat in the giant, connected brain of the Conclave. The leaders sit in their own special pods shaped like six-sided hexagons, each one perfectly made to fit their unique bodies. Some pods float easily on invisible currents, letting their occupants gently drift. Others are firmly attached to the shining floor, giving a stable place for beings who prefer solid ground. And some are barely seen inside glowing force fields, made to protect fragile bodies or hold strange atmospheres. The air itself is filled with a soft symphony of sound, a gentle hum of 1,000 different languages. But everyone understands each other instantly and perfectly, thanks to tiny language devices worn by every thinking creature there. The chamber, even though it's so big, vibrates with a living energy, a constant hum of talking and quiet political moves. In the middle of all this amazing life and incredible technology, on a slightly raised platform, stands Alia Rin. She is human, in her early 30s. She's of average height, and she stands calmly but is also very aware of everything around her. She has a quiet confidence about her. Her kind, smart eyes, a special human trait that many aliens found both friendly and surprisingly sharp, look around at all the gathered leaders. She misses no small shift in how they sit, no quick flash of light from an alien's eye. Her clothes are very simple and plain, a dark diplomatic uniform that stands out against all the fancy clothing and tech worn by others. It shows she cares more about doing her job well than showing off. She doesn't have the big, strong muscles of a Thraxian warrior, whose natural armor seemed to glow even under the chamber lights, showing off raw power. She doesn't have the glowing, pulsing light of a crystalline leader, whose very body seemed to take in and give off light in a beautiful dance, like a being made of pure energy. And she doesn't show the complex, clock-like precision of a chronomancer, whose special time devices subtly clicked and whirred perfectly with their deep thoughts, like a living calculating machine. No, Alia Rin is simply human. She looks ordinary. It's easy for others to not notice her when judging by size or outward strength. A low murmur, a gentle shift in attention, moves through the huge room as Alia begins to speak. Her voice, calm and clear but with a quiet strength, easily fills the large space without needing to be loud. She immediately starts talking about the quickly growing fights that have started to bother the Eldorian Enclave and the Novarian dynasties. This was a local problem that for many long cycles the Conclave had simply seen as a small, easy-to-handle annoyance. As she mentions an important recent piece of news, the confirmed, terrifying attack on a civilian transport ship, a sharp, high-pitched, whirring, chirping sound suddenly cuts her off in the middle of her sentence. It comes from Zello, the old, formal leader from the Novarian dynasties. His three-legged bird-like body, usually calm, is now visibly tense with anger, his feathery head feathers standing straight up. He starts a furious, translated shout of anger, his words echoing across the room. He accuses the Eldorians of attacking without any reason, angrily saying that their empty claims about needing resources are just a thin excuse for taking over new lands in a cruel way. Before Zello can finish his angry speech, another voice, deep and booming, A series of throaty clicks and whistles bursts out from the Eldorian side of the chamber. This is Grix, a truly huge, many-limbed reptile, his massive scaly body filling his pod to its very edges. He roars his translated defense, his voice a low growl that makes the very floor shake. He claims their actions were only because they were provoked, a needed and right response to the Novarians' illegal mining deep inside their own marked economic area. He insists with strong belief that they acted purely to protect themselves, forced into a fight they did not want. Alia Rin, seeming unfazed by the sudden dramatic outbursts of alien anger, simply raises a hand. It's a small, almost unseen gesture, not demanding anything loudly, yet it holds a quiet power, an inspoken demand for order that seems to calm the deeper, more peaceful currents of the chamber. She waits patiently, her smart eyes steady, watching the leaders as the storm of emotions slowly, unwillingly begins to die down. Only when the chamber has returned to a fragile quiet does she continue, her voice returning to her calm, reasoned, and very diplomatic tone. She explains that the human group deeply, truly understands the difficult parts and serious importance of both sides of the problem. She recognizes the pain and the feelings of unfairness on both sides. She then carefully explains how they have spent the last 3 cycles, long periods of time, each one like a year on their home planet, tirelessly working to mediate between the two fighting groups. This involved countless hours looking at detailed land information, studying very old trade agreements, and helping many talks and attempts at peace between their leaders and diplomats. She then formally suggests a new idea, both surprising and elegant. A new neutral zone carefully set up and watched by neutral conclave forces to create a safe space between them. Most importantly, she combines this with joint projects to develop resources in the highly disputed asteroid field, offering a fresh way to share wealth and benefit together, instead of endless, harmful fighting. The ripple of quiet laughs, a few amused sighs spread through the room, a wave of polite but clear doubt. The feeling, mostly unspoken, is very clear, almost like a shared thought in the minds of the alien leaders. Humans, with their endless talks, their endless willingness to meet halfway, their constant need for everyone to agree and understand each other, they are known across the conclave as the best peace seekers, which is a true and often praised fact. They have, without a doubt, successfully ended more small fights, smoothed over more difficult diplomatic problems, and stopped more local wars than any other single species in the conclave. They often succeeded simply by being incredibly persistent and having a strange human knack for understanding and working with the very different minds of aliens. And this was the galaxy's widely held, deeply set belief, they are also clearly seen as the weakest. They don't command huge, scary fleets that could challenge the sheer, raw power of the Thraxian army. They don't have super-powerful weapons that could destroy worlds, like the energy blasts of the chronomancers. They don't control vast lands full of resources or important trade routes that would make others fear or respect them because of money. They just had words, so many, many words. A crystalline leader, their whole body shining with a soft inner light, leans slightly forward in their hexagonal pod. Their voice is a soft, musical hum, but it clearly shows a thoughtful doubt. They politely acknowledge Ambassador Rin's species' unique, almost puzzling ability for long, peaceful talks. But then they question if it can truly work against the deep-seated desire for land, the old grudges, and the strong basic instincts that cause most fights between star systems. Alia offers a faint, almost invisible smile, tilting her head slightly in a knowing way. She patiently explains that for humanity, success is not just about power or winning battles. It's mainly about stopping bloodshed, about ending suffering, about protecting life. And in that, she states, her voice gaining a quiet but strong belief, humanity has always done exceptionally well. She talks about how deeply they understand the true value of one life, one family, one future. Perhaps, she says aloud, it is exactly because their own troubled, often brutal history, marked by thousands of years of terrible internal wars and close calls with wiping themselves out, has taught them how fragile and easily lost these things can be. She points to a large, clear screen that appears smoothly above the platform. It shows a series of carefully chosen pictures. First, a human crew, seeming weak by galactic standards, their bodies smaller and less imposing than many aliens, carefully helping a damaged Novarian cargo ship. Their faces are dirty and tired, but their expressions are focused, determined, and full of care. Next, human medics, their quick hands a blur of practiced motion, tending to badly hurt Eldorian miners after a violent attack. Their caring presence and gentle touch are a sharp contrast to the cold, sterile, and efficient medical robots of other species. Finally, human engineers working tirelessly, and with a shared almost joyful energy alongside different alien partners, helping to set up crucial emergency communication lines and strong temporary shelters in a lonely neutral zone. Their cleverness turns what seemed like impossible situations into real life-saving solutions. These are not pictures of huge power, but of quiet strength, deep care, and steady teamwork. It clearly works. The true honesty, the undeniable proof of their caring success in these small important moments, washes over the chamber. A reluctant, surprised respect for humanity's unusual but clearly successful methods finally becomes very clear. The murmuring dies down. The leaders settle, feeling humbled and perhaps a little confused by the quiet power of her presentation. Our focus now quickly shifts from the bright halls of conclave diplomacy to a small, quiet conclave outpost, sitting dangerously among sharp, tall, purple rock formations in the far reaches of the Starweave Arm. Here, humble human transport ships, sleek and practical in their design, look almost amusingly small next to the huge, heavily armed warships belonging to other more important conclave member species, which are docked nearby or flying patrol missions. It's a clear visual reminder of how small humanity seems in terms of military strength, a constant, unspoken judgment. Inside the human part of the outpost, officially called the Human Diplomatic Embassy, a controlled mess is happening. The space is efficient, yet surprisingly warm, filled with the comforting, slightly metallic smell of synthetic food and the soft, steady hum of advanced but familiar human technology. Computers pulse with live information from all over the galaxy, their colorful screens showing a complex, constantly updating web of facts. Several human diplomats, both men and women of different ages and backgrounds, work with intense, focused energy, their movements precise and quick. There's a strong feeling of pack bonding here, a silent understanding, a shared goal that ties them together. They move easily together, their actions smooth and coordinated, knowing what each other needs, offering quiet help, and making fast, firm decisions without needing to say much. Dr. Liam Cade, a senior human strategist, a person whose smart mind could cut through difficult problems like a powerful laser, looks closely at a holographic star map, his forehead deeply wrinkled in thought. He's more like a military expert than a traditional diplomat. But because humanity has a smaller place in the galaxy, everyone has to do many jobs, using their skills in different ways to be as effective as possible. He looks up sharply as Alia enters, moving quickly and with purpose, taking off her diplomatic pin and clipping it to a magnetic rack by the door. This small action marks her shift from public speaker to military leader. Liam's voice is quiet, almost a serious whisper, but filled with a clear, chilling urgency. "Alia," he states, his eyes fixed on the quickly changing star map, which highlights a distant, bad-looking area. The Vorlag are attacking again, and this time it's not just on the edge of known space. They've definitely crossed the Cerulean Drift. That Alia is a conclave-protected route, a very important one. Alia's face becomes slightly harder, a tight look around her eyes. The name Vorlag itself, when whispered, often sends a shiver down the spines of many across the conclave. They are a mystery, a new race that recently appeared from the far edge of the galaxy, and no one knows much about their true beginnings. They are mostly known for two terrifying things: how incredibly fast they learn new technology, taking in and using alien tech almost instantly, and how chillingly well they copy strategies, perfectly copying and then improving enemy battle plans. Unlike other species, the Vorlag don't use regular diplomacy. They don't send messengers. They don't suggest peace treaties. They don't talk things over. They simply adapt, take over, and spread, without stopping. Alia's voice is tight with expectation. A low urgency. What do they want, Liam? Resources? Land? What do they want this time? Is it a new mining area? A key jump point in space? Liam shakes his head, his eyes steady as he brings up a complex, multi-layered floating image of Vorlag fleet movements. Their ships look all the same, which is terrifying. They change their ship's outer layer and energy patterns to perfectly match any known ship they meet, then subtly, terrifyingly, make it better, making them unpredictable ghosts in the vacuum of space. No demands, Alia, he replies, his voice filled with growing dread. They just take. Their attack patterns are copying Conclave patrols with tiny improvements. A fraction of a second faster here, a degree sharper there. Their energy patterns are changing, almost mimicking our own defense network frequencies, before passing right through them, as if our shields and alarms simply don't exist. Suddenly, a young human technician at a nearby control panel gasps. A choked sound escaping his throat, his eyes wide with shock and a terrible, dawning horror. "Ambassador Dr. Cade," he stammers, his voice cracking with fear and urgency. "New reports just came in from the Xylos Nebula system. A civilian colony ship, the Pioneer's Hope, protected by the Conclave. It's been hailed by Vorlag ships. A cold, heavy feeling of dread fills the room, smothering the quiet hum of technology, replacing it with a ringing silence. The Pioneer's Hope was a large ship carrying many different species of colonists, families, children, engineers, scientists, all their hopes for new beginnings on a distant, untouched world." Alia's voice is sharp, cutting through the sudden, suffocating silence. "Hailed? What are their conditions? What are they asking for in exchange for the lives on board?" The technician's fingers fly across the control panel, his movements shaky and desperate, his eyes stuck on the incoming, horrifying information. He struggles to find the words, swallowing hard. "No conditions, Ambassador," he finally manages, his voice barely a whisper, filled with a terrible certainty. "Just a message." One word repeated over and over. A chilling, computer-generated voice, strangely flat, completely without any feeling, yet carrying an unsettling, absolute finality, echoes softly from the control panel speakers. It repeats slowly, deliberately, like a cold iron death bell, "Subsume, subsume, subsume." In the crushing, silent darkness of the Xylos Nebula system, the Pioneer's Hope, a huge, unarmed ship carrying civilians, hangs like a broken, helpless giant. Its dream of a new home is dying with it. Around it, several sleek, chameleon-like Vorlag ships become clearer, terrifying to look at. Their forms come together from the starlight. Their outer skins shift and flow. One moment they look like the familiar, comforting shapes of Conclave cruisers. The next, they change into something completely alien and threatening, impossible to identify clearly. On the Pioneer's Hope bridge, sheer, raw panic takes over. The bridge crew, a desperate mix of different civilian species, scramble around frantically, their movements messy and useless. Sirens blare, a sad wailing sound echoing through the dying ship. Captain Fendra, a four-armed furry creature, screams into a communication device, her many limbs waving wildly in fear and hopelessness. "Conclave Command, this is the Pioneer's Hope. We are under attack. They didn't warn us, they're not answering our calls, they're just firing, they're ripping us apart." Back in the Conclave Grand Debate Chamber, total chaos breaks out. The Vorlag's unprovoked brutal attack has finally and completely shattered the Conclave's long-held sense of peace and safety. Big screens across the huge chamber now show horrifying live pictures from the Xylos Nebula. The Pioneer's Hope tilting dangerously, its huge outer shell broken in awful gaping holes. The last bits of its precious air are escaping into the empty space, carrying with them the quiet screams of its dying passengers. Life pods, tiny against the vastness of space, shoot out every now and then like desperate seeds pushed by failing, sputtering systems. Each one is a fragile, last hope for survival against terrible odds. The Vorlag ships, cold, efficient, and completely without mercy, continue their planned destruction, their energy blasts tearing through the ship's last parts, making sure it will be completely destroyed. Zello, the Novarian leader, is on his feet, his high-pitched chirping now a desperate, terrified shriek that cuts through the noise. They are not asking for terms, they are destroying. This is not war, Elder. It is complete killing. Grix, the Eldorian, just as angry, slams a huge limb down onto his control panel, making a loud thud that shakes the floor. Where is the Conclave fleet? Why are there no defenses? Why are we not fighting back with all our power? Are we just going to sit here and watch them die? Conclave Command, led by the calm and respected Elder Thorian, an ancient, many-eyed being whose wisdom was famous across the galaxy, tries to get control of the quickly worsening chaos. His voice, usually slow, careful, and calming, now has a slight shake, showing his deep shock. "We are getting ready, leaders," he says, his voice strained. "Our defense forces are indeed on their way. This is an attack we've never seen before with such cruelty. But his words, meant to make them feel better, don't work against the cold, clear truth. Ilia Rin, her face a mask of grim, strong determination, stands in the swirling confusion of the chamber. Her voice, cutting through the panic talking with surprising clarity, carries a steady resolve that makes everyone pay attention. On their way is not enough, she declares, her eyes fixed on the horrifying pictures of the dying ship. The Pioneer's hope is a ship full of regular people. There are families aboard. Children, scientists, every single second counts. We must start rescue efforts right away, now. A sharp, thin voice from a small, crystal-like species echoes the cold, hard truth that chills every being in the room to its core. Rescue, with what? The Vorlag are copying our long-range, faster-than-light travel blockers. Our closest defense fleet is 3 cycles away. There is no one close enough. Any try would be useless. The cold, unyielding reality of the situation hangs in the air like a heavy blanket of sadness. The conclave, built for slow, rule-based responses and the planned use of huge winning power, was simply too slow, too stiff, too deeply stuck in its own ways and rules. Their strength was in their giant size and long-term plans, not their quickness or their ability to react instantly. Alia turns, her eyes looking over the faces of the leaders. She sees not just fear and anger, but a chilling, deep sense of giving up, the growing realization that they are completely helpless, unable to protect those they promised to keep safe. Then we must act, she says, her voice firm, strong, almost like a promise. We must send what we have, now. It is our duty. Another leader, a round, energy-giving creature, flashes angrily, its light showing strong disapproval. Ambassador Rin, it booms, its voice shaking with disrespect. Your human ships are small, mostly unarmed. It would be a suicidal act, a pointless loss of life. You would only add to the number of dead, a useless sacrifice. Ilia's jaw tightens, a muscle twitching in her cheek. This is the moment their believed weakness, their physical smallness and lack of military might is thrown directly at them, a teasing remark at their unimportant place in the galaxy. But it's also the exact moment human stubbornness starts to burn, a strong flame born from a deep, almost unreasonable defiance, a refusal to accept defeat. Pointless, she replies, her voice now sharp with a toughness that surprises even some of the experienced leaders who thought they knew humanity. Saving a single life is never pointless. Our species may not have your grand fleets, your devastating weapons, your ancient technologies, or your thousands of years of established power, but we have something else. We have the strong belief that no life is lost while there is breath to fight for it. And we will not leave our fellow thinking beings, not while there is a chance, not while we are alive. She doesn't wait for permission. She doesn't wait for a vote. She turns, her movements sharp, purposeful, and walks directly out of the chamber, leaving the confused, shocked leaders behind her. Behind her, the panic, instead of calming down, grows. But now a small spark of something else begins to appear amidst the fear, a reluctant, surprised respect for humanity's pure, illogical defiance. Their believed weakness at this critical moment was suddenly showing itself as an unexpected, terrifying strength. Back in the busy, but now intensely focused human diplomatic embassy, a whirlwind of desperate activity breaks out. Alia bursts in, her face showing a desperate urgency that barely hides her strong will. Dr. Liam Cade is already shouting orders, his voice clear and sharp, his hands moving quickly across many floating screens, bringing up ship lists and flight paths. We're sending out every available transport, he announces, his eyes fixed on a quickly growing list of rescue ships, showing ship IDs and volunteer names. We're changing what we can for fast rescue. Smallest shields, most power. It's a huge risk, Alia. A monumental, desperate risk, Alia nods, her determination absolute. It's the only choice we have, Liam, she states, her voice clear and steady. Send out the call to every human ship in this area. Regular people, traders, cargo ships, even fancy pleasure yachts used for space tourism. Tell them we have a choice. Stand by and watch innocent lives die, or stand up and fight for those lives with whatever we have. Within just a few minutes, the communication channels buzz with a clear human trait. A flood of immediate agreement, short and firm. No long arguments, no talks about rules, no discussions of danger. Just quiet, determined nods. The pack bonding, that deep, almost basic human need to protect their own, and by extension anyone they consider part of their pack, is clear for all to see. Small, ordinary human ships, usually used for regular cargo trips between star systems or calm explorations of space clouds, immediately change their courses. Their engines glow brightly, pushing their power to the limit, rushing full speed towards the distant troubled Xylos Nebula. One tough human pilot, a cargo ship captain named Jarek, his voice rough and worn from a lifetime of flying through asteroid fields and wild space storms, responds with a simple, almost casual acceptance that hides how serious the situation is. "Heard the call, Ambassador," he crackles over the comms, his voice mixed with the familiar static and hum of an old, reliable ship. "Got a few hundred emergency beds here, not fancy but they'll do, and a whole lot of stubbornness. Just tell us where to aim this metal box." Liam looks at Alia, a grim, shared understanding passing between them. Their quickly put-together fleet, a mixed group of civilian ships used for a new purpose, was absolutely no match for the Vorlag in a fight. Not in a direct battle, not in a normal war. But their shared will, their strong determination to save lives, their refusal to back down, that they both knew was a completely different kind of weapon, a purely human one. In the crushing, silent darkness of the Xylos Nebula system, the Pioneer's hope is now terribly damaged. Its huge outer shell is broken in awful wide holes. The last bits of its precious air are escaping into the empty space, carrying with them the silent screams of its dying passengers. Life pods, tiny against the huge size of space, shoot out every now and then like desperate seeds pushed by failing, sputtering systems. Each one is a fragile, last hope for survival against impossible odds. The Vorlag ships, cold, efficient, and completely without mercy, continue their planned destruction. Their energy blasts rip through the ship's last parts, making sure it will be completely destroyed. Then from the outer edge of the system, against the backdrop of distant stars, a swarm of tiny, seemingly unimportant lights appears. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of them, growing quickly in number and intensity. These are not the grand, sleek warships of the Conclave, but a mixed, defiant collection of human civilian ships. Their engines are glowing brightly, pushing their ships to their breaking point, rushing headfirst into the danger zone. They weave through the chaotic broken pieces of the dying colony ship, ignoring the Vorlag's chilling warning shots. Their weak, quickly added shields flicker dangerously under the incoming fire. Their raw speed, their desperate bravery, and their sheer numbers, which are overwhelming because no one expected them, are their only immediate protection. Their strong will to reach those screaming souls on the dying ship is their only weapon. They are small, they are weak, and they are utterly unafraid. They are humanity, and they are coming to save their extended pack no matter what happens. And so, even though the odds were completely against them, the species that everyone in the galaxy saw as the weakest began their deep and frightening change. The Celestial Conclave, so sure of its old rules and peaceful ways, was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. The galaxy, so vast and old, was about to find out what happens when humanity is pushed to its very limits. The vast swirling beauty of the Xylos Nebula had been brutally ripped apart. This once peaceful cloud of cosmic gas and dust, a painter's dream in purple and blue, was now a nightmare, a graveyard where the Vorlag had begun their terrible harvest. The Pioneer's hope, a giant civilian transport ship designed to carry tens of thousands of dreams to a new life, was now a shattered hulk, its gleaming hull twisted into grotesque, smoking metal. It broke apart slowly, agonizingly, under the relentless, cold attacks of the alien invaders. Life pods, tiny and fragile against the immense backdrop of dying metal, shot out into the void like desperate seeds, each one carrying the last, flickering hopes of those trapped inside. The Vorlag ships, still moving with chilling, perfect efficiency, continued their calculated destruction, each energy blast tearing apart another vital section of the innocent vessel. Their goal was horrifyingly clear. Not capture, not demands, but total annihilation, a systematic taking apart of everything. Then from the outer edge of the system, against the backdrop of swirling cosmic dust and distant, uncaring stars, a truly astonishing and utterly unbelievable sight began to appear. It wasn't the proud, sleek, heavily armed warships of the Conclave, which were still light years away, struggling through congested jump lanes. No, it was a swarm of tiny, seemingly unimportant lights, dozens at first, then hundreds, then thousands of them, growing rapidly in number and intensity like a tide of glittering dust. These were the human civilian vessels, everyday cargo ships, long-haul transports, small personal yachts meant for quiet vacations, even hastily repurposed orbital taxis. A mixed, defiant collection of humble vessels, none of them designed for battle. Their thrusters glowed fiercely, pushing their engines beyond their very limits, burning with a desperate urgency. They were rushing headlong without a second thought, into the very jaws of a danger that would make even battle-hardened veterans tremble. They were a chaotic, messy cloud compared to a military fleet, without any battle formation, but their purpose was sharp, clear, and unshakable: rescue. The Vorlag ships, in their terrifying, shifting forms, paused. Just for a moment, their strange, constantly changing energy signatures flickered, as if their advanced computer brains were trying to understand this new, unexpected input. They hadn't calculated for this. Their strategies had been built on predicting the slow, predictable response of a conclave military fleet, waiting for orders, forming up. They hadn't expected this sudden, seemingly suicidal rush of unarmed civilians. For a terrifying, silent moment, the Vorlag ships hung motionless, their sensors working overtime, processing the utterly illogical nature of this incoming wave. But the pause was brief, brutally short. The Vorlag were incredibly fast learners. Their chameleon ships, which could change their shape and energy to look like anything, now began to adapt even faster, shifting totally, their forms blurring as if trying to understand, truly understand, this new chaotic approach. They fired warning shots, streaks of green energy cutting through the void, meant to scare off these new, unexpected intruders, to make them turn and run. But the human ships did not scare. They did not turn. They did not run. Instead, they weaved through the chaotic, deadly debris field of the dying colony ship, dodging falling wreckage and lancing energy blasts with an impossible grace. Their minimal, hastily added shields flickered dangerously, overloaded by the constant strain of incoming fire. Explosions flashed across the nebula as some vessels were hit. A small cargo freighter, its hull painted with a friendly blue stripe, took a direct hit to its engines, bursting into a silent fireball, its cheerful paint quickly consumed by flames. Another, a family transport, spiraled wildly away, its lights going out one by one, a stark symbol of sacrifice. Each loss was a sharp, painful blow, a grim reminder of the huge, almost unthinkable risk they were taking. Yet they kept coming. Their speed, their desperate courage, and their sheer numbers, overwhelming in their unexpected arrival, were their only immediate defense. Their unyielding determination to reach those screaming souls on the dying ship, to pull them from the void, was their only weapon. They are small. They were often considered weak by galactic standards, and they were utterly unafraid of death when lives were on the line. They were humanity, and they were here to save their extended pack, no matter what the cost. On the bridge of a human medical transport, the Mercy's Call, now acting as a forward command center, Alia Rin watched the chaos unfold on her main view screen. She wasn't just a diplomat anymore. She was part of this desperate gamble, her diplomatic title now a distant memory. Her face was set in a grim, determined line, but her eyes, usually so calm, held a fierce, burning light that reflected the explosions outside. Dr. Liam Cade stood beside her, his hands a blur over his comms console, shouting orders into a dozen different channels. "All right, listen up, all rescue craft. Sector Gamma 7, we have multiple life pod signatures, heavily damaged. Freighter Stargazer, your closest, move in fast. Prioritize civilian non-combatants. No engagement with Vorlag vessels, I repeat, no engagement, just get the people." His voice was steady, crisp, meant to cut through the static, the fear, and the adrenaline of the moment. Human ships, never designed for battle, now became swift, nimble rescue vessels. Small specialized boarding craft, usually used for routine station repairs or simple cargo transfers, zipped out from larger transports. Their crews had hastily armed them with industrial cutting lasers, normally used for cutting through metal beams, and had reinforced their small hulls with whatever spare metal plating and scrap could be found. They flew towards the Pioneer's Hope like a swarm of angry, buzzing insects, too fast and too numerous for the Vorlag to target precisely. They weren't trying to fight the Vorlag, they were simply ignoring them, focusing solely on the rescue, their very disregard for combat a new, baffling tactic to the alien invaders. Aboard the dying Pioneer's Hope, Captain Fendra, a four-armed, furry creature, watched in stunned disbelief as these tiny human ships, so often dismissed as insignificant, suddenly swarmed around her vessel. They were not military. They were civilian, yet they were here, rushing towards the screams. They're coming for us," she gasped, her many arms trembling as she saw human crafts docking with breached sections, extending flexible tunnels made of emergency sealant, and even simply opening their cargo bays for desperate, last-minute jumps from the shattered hull, hoping to catch falling survivors. The human ships worked with breathtaking speed and a startling lack of panic. Crews raced through debris-filled corridors, their headlamps cutting through thick smoke and flickering emergency lights, pulling survivors from crumbling sections, guiding panicked aliens through smoke-filled passages. They didn't ask about species, they didn't care about past conflicts. A human pilot, their face grim with concentration, deftly maneuvered their small shuttle to catch a tumbling escape pod that had been damaged, drawing it into their makeshift hangar with a gentle clunk. Another human, a former construction worker with strong hands, used a repurposed plasma torch to cut through a twisted bulkhead, the sparks flying wildly, freeing trapped Novarian children, their large, scared eyes blinking in the sudden light. Their actions were messy and coordinated in a military sense, but driven by an overwhelming shared empathy, a raw protective instinct. The Vorlag, for their part, seemed deeply, almost intellectually, confused. Their complex systems, designed to counter organized military tactics, struggled to adapt to this irrational, self-sacrificing surge of compassion. They fired, but their targeting algorithms were not built for a swarm of small, non-military vessels, driven by pure instinct. They could destroy individual ships, and they did, but they couldn't stop the overall flow. They observed, they analyzed, and they learned. The repeating metallic voice of Subsume still echoed, but now it felt less like a simple threat and more like a statement of ultimate purpose for them. They were not just taking physical things. They were absorbing information, patterns, and even abstract concepts like this new, bewildering, empathy-driven swarm tactic. Miles away, in the gleaming conclave grand debate chamber, the holographic displays, usually so pristine and showing only ordered, predictable data, now showed a chaotic, terrifying scene. The Pioneers' hope was almost gone. A faint, dying ember, but a new flickering mass of red and green dots, representing the human ships and the survivors, was visible around it. The delegates, who had remained frozen in their pods, watched in stunned silence, their earlier murmurs and chuckles replaced by a collective horrified gasp that rippled through the vast chamber. Zello, the Novarian delegate, his earlier terror now mixed with a strange, dawning awe, finally found his voice a high-pitched, shaky whisper. They actually went. The humans actually went into the chaos. They have no military might. Grix, the Eldorian, usually so rigid and proud in his huge reptilian form, simply stared at the display, his many limbs still, a look of profound disbelief on his scaled face. Even Elder Thorian, the head of Conclave Command, whose ancient, multifaceted eyes had seen millennia of galactic history, looked genuinely bewildered, his ancient wisdom briefly failing him in the face of such illogical bravery. The Conclave fleet, a majestic armada of sleek, powerful warships, was now visibly entering the Xylos Nebula system on the main display, their imposing forms dwarfing the tiny, struggling human rescue ships. But they were too late for the Pioneers' hope. They arrived just in time to witness the messy, desperate, but undeniably heroic human rescue in progress. The Vorlag, sensing the arrival of the Conclave's true military might, a force they did understand and could analyze, abruptly disengaged from the Pioneers' hope. Their chameleon ships shimmered, their energy signatures twisting and blurring, becoming almost invisible, before they vanished into hyperspace as quickly and silently as they had appeared. They left behind a dying civilian ship, a vast deadly debris field, and a swarm of exhausted human vessels, covered in dents and scorch marks, but now filled with terrified, grateful, and deeply confused alien survivors. A stunned, heavy silence fell over the conclave chamber. The Elder Thorian slowly turned his multifaceted eyes to the empty dais where Aelia Rin had stood just moments before. A soft hum of profound realization spread through the delegates. Humanity, so easily dismissed as weak, without a formidable fleet or planet-shattering weapons, had rushed into the very jaws of an unknown terror, not with force, but with rescue transports. They hadn't won a battle, not in the traditional sense, but they had saved lives that the mighty Conclave, with all its power and bureaucracy, could not. They had acted not with calculated military strategy, but with a raw, almost illogical compassion that defied all strategic reasoning known to the galaxy. The immediate aftermath of the Xylos Nebula rescue was chaotic, yet organized by the arrival of the Conclave fleet. Though they were too late to prevent the attack, their powerful medical ships and salvage crews helped with the final stages of the rescue, transferring survivors from the battered human ships to proper, sterile medical facilities. The human ships, many of them barely spaceworthy but having fulfilled their purpose, returned to their small outpost, their crews utterly exhausted, their faces grimmed with effort but filled with a quiet, shared pride that transcended their physical fatigue. News of the Xylos Nebula rescue, carried by frantic comms and stunned eyewitness accounts, spread like wildfire across every corner of the galaxy. It wasn't celebrated as a military victory, for no enemy had been truly defeated. But it was something far more profound, something that shook the very foundations of galactic understanding. It was a demonstration of a different kind of power, one that baffled most species. The human diplomatic embassy, usually a quiet hub of paperwork, was suddenly a hive of constant activity. This time, it wasn't just human voices. Delegations from species who had previously dismissed them, who had laughed at their endless words, now lined up requesting urgent meetings, their faces a mix of disbelief, curiosity, and grudging respect. Alia Rin, though drained by the ordeal, found herself busier than ever. She moved through the embassy like a ghost, snatching moments of rest between frantic calls. Liam Cade, usually focused on cold hard data, was now constantly fielding calls from incredulous alien strategists who couldn't reconcile the chaotic human actions with any known military doctrine. How did they do it? Was the common question. Why did they do it when it was so illogical, when it risked so much for so little apparent gain? During one such meeting, a high-ranking Thraxian military commander, a creature of imposing bulk, armored hide, and strict discipline, surprised everyone by actually bowing slightly to Alia. His voice, usually a deep, commanding rumble, now held a new, uncharacteristic respect. "Ambassador," he rumbled, his thick fingers drumming against a polished table. "Your species, you are not logical. Your ships were not armed for conflict. Your action was suicidal. Yet, you achieved what our mightiest fleet, bound by rules of engagement and tactical calculations, could not. You did it simply by caring more for life than for your own safety. We do not understand it. It makes no tactical sense." Alia, despite her exhaustion, offered a faint, tired smile. "Perhaps understanding, Commander," she said, her voice soft but firm, "comes not from logic alone, but from shared humanity, or perhaps, as we call it, shared sentience. The shared experience of being alive, of valuing life, of needing each other. We are a pack, and we protect our pack." She watched his multifaceted eyes, trying to gauge if he truly grasped the concept. For many alien species, the idea of sacrificing oneself for a non-related, non-kin being was baffling, almost alien. The perception of humanity began to shift dramatically across the galaxy. They were still not seen as a conventional military threat, but they were no longer simply the weak peace-seekers, the endless talkers. They were now the unpredictable compassionates, or more colloquially, the ones who don't give up. Some species were deeply moved by their actions, seeing a new, inspiring path forward for galactic interaction. Others, especially the more rigid, power-focused civilizations, viewed them with growing suspicion, struggling to classify a race that defied their established understanding of power dynamics and warfare. A species that would risk everything for nothing but lives was either dangerously foolish or holding a secret strength that scared them more than any weapon. A week after the rescue, a new, chilling realization began to dawn in the human embassy. Liam Cade's data screens, usually showing predictable patterns, flared with new, troubling analyses. He called Alia over, his face grim, his hands tight on the console. "Alia, the Vorlag, they're moving again. Their fleet signatures are changing, but this time it's different. Very different. Their patterns, they're not just mimicking our conclave patrols anymore. They're mimicking us." He brought up a complex, multi-layered holographic analysis. "They're adapting the swarm tactic," Liam explained, pointing to a swirling mass of new red dots on the map, deeper in established conclave territory. "They're sending out smaller, faster, seemingly unarmed scouting vessels, just like our civilian ships did in the Xylos Nebula. They're using their chameleon hulls to look like innocent transports, merchant vessels. They're probing our weaknesses, not with brute force, but with agility and surprise, using our own unique methods against us." He paused, a cold dread seeping into his voice. "And their subsume message has a new layer to it. It's evolved. VORLAG voice OS subsume, adapt, subsume, incorporate." The Vorlag weren't just taking physical things anymore. They were taking tactics, strategies, even the very philosophical underpinnings of their enemies, humanity's unique strength, their unpredictable compassion, Their pack bonding, their willingness to throw caution to the wind for a single life, had been observed, processed, and was now being chillingly turned against the entire conclave. Aelia stared at the map, her heart sinking. "They're learning from us," she said, her voice quiet, a mix of despair and dawning horror. "They're using our own strength, our very nature, against us." Liam nodded, his gaze distant, seeing the larger game. "And the conclave still doesn't understand. They see power only in fleets, in weapons, in numbers. They don't see what we do, the strength in our illogical bonds. They won't see this coming until it's too late." The next challenge, humanity realized, would be far more complex and dangerous than a simple rescue. The Vorlag were not just an enemy. They were a terrifying mirror, reflecting and twisting what they learned. And humanity, the unexpected peacemakers, had just unintentionally given them a new, devastating lesson in how to fight, a lesson that could unravel the very fabric of the conclave. The galaxy had long underestimated humanity's heart, their strange, illogical courage. Now it was about to discover if that heart could also lead them through the shadow of their own. Copied tactics. The game had changed in a way no one could have predicted, and humanity was no longer just a player. They were a teacher, whose most profound lessons could now be used against them all. The universe held its breath, poised on the edge of a new, terrifying dawn. The cold, metallic voice of the Vorlag, now repeating the chilling phrase, "Subsume, adapt, subsume, incorporate," was more than just a sound. It echoed not only through the human embassy but deep into the very core of galactic peace. Humanity had, without meaning to, taught their terrible enemy a new, terrifying lesson, and now the Vorlag were putting it into action. Their ships, which once could be recognized by their unique energy signatures, even through their chameleon skins, were now appearing everywhere across the galaxy, not as huge battle fleets, but as countless small, quick vessels. They were designed to look exactly like the common civilian and merchant ships of the conclave, and even those of humanity. The Vorlag weren't just copying outward appearances, they were copying the very patterns of life. The soft hum of cargo engines, the gentle drift of tourist liners, the irregular jumps of a private shuttle. They were ghosts in the shipping lanes, unseen and unknown. The celestial conclave, in its vast, slow-moving wisdom, simply couldn't grasp this new, cunning threat. Their powerful ancient detection systems, built over thousands of years to spot and fight large, clear military forces, dismissed these tiny, scattered signals. They registered them as harmless civilian traffic, a mere annoyance in the busy lanes of space. More human merchants. A Thraxian general scoffed dismissively, his massive form filling his command chair. Clogging up the lanes with their disorganized trade routes, they require stricter regulation. The Eldorians, known for their sharp senses, spoke of anomalies in their long-range scanners, faint energy traces that didn't fit known patterns, but no one understood the true silent danger. Aelia and Liam's urgent warnings, screaming about the Vorlag's new swarm mimicry and infiltration tactics, were either completely ignored or seen as the nervous exaggerations of a small, jumpy, and overly emotional species. To the conclave, humanity was still just the weak peace-seekers even after their brave rescue at Xylo's Nebula. The idea of a civilian fleet being used as a weapon, or an enemy copying such tactics, was simply outside their long-held military rulebook, a concept too strange to fit their established protocols. While the conclave debated and ignored, the Vorlag moved with ruthless, silent speed. Their seemingly innocent ships slipped through conclave defenses undetected, deeper and deeper into a vital sector. Their ultimate target was Lyra Prime. This planet was a bright, jewel-like orb, shimmering with life and home to rich, vibrant cultures. Lyra Prime wasn't just a world. It was a symbol of galactic peace, a thriving home to billions of people from dozens of different species. A true melting pot of galactic diversity where all lived in harmony. The Vorlag didn't attack it with weapons. Instead, they surrounded it, establishing an invisible, impenetrable energy barrier, a silent cage that trapped everything inside. No ship could leave, no message could get out, no energy could pass through. The planet was sealed. Then came the message. It wasn't the usual, blunt subsume this time. The cold, synthesized voice, now subtly layered with stolen data fragments of conclave communication patterns, spoke directly to the conclave with chilling clarity. It sounded more authoritative, more undeniable. The population of Lyra Prime will be transferred to our collective. There is no escape. Any resistance will result in full termination of all life on the surface, followed by resource extraction. The Vorlag were not just demanding surrender, they were demanding to take the people, to incorporate their minds, their bodies, their very essences, into their unknown collective. The conclave was horrified, but utterly paralyzed. They had no counter-tactic to such a complete silent takeover, especially one that threatened billions of lives with such cold mechanical finality. Their vast fleets were still too far, their strategies too slow, their minds too rigid to comprehend this new type of war. Back in the now bustling, yet grim and silent human diplomatic embassy, Aelia Rin stared at the holographic map of Lyra Prime. The bright blue and green orb, once a symbol of life, now glowed with a sickly red shimmer, trapped by the Vorlag's silent, unyielding grip. Dr. Liam Cade stood beside her, his face pale, his hands clenched into tight fists, his usual calm replaced by a simmering fury. "They're stalling, Aelia," Liam said, his voice flat, devoid of hope. "The conclave is debating. They're arguing over petty protocols, over who has jurisdiction to act, over whether the Vorlag can truly do what they say. They won't act until it's too late. Billions will die, slowly, agonizingly, their minds absorbed into whatever twisted horror the Vorlag intend." He had seen the raw data from the Xylos Nebula incident, the terrifying records of captured minds, and the fate that awaited those subsumed. Aelia closed her eyes, a silent scream building in her throat, a wave of despair threatening to engulf her. She had seen the raw, unedited data too, the slow, agonizing process of Vorlag incorporation, a fate far worse than any quick death for any sentient being. They couldn't let it happen, it was unthinkable. But what could they, humanity, do? The Conclave's entire fleet was still organizing, light years away, designed for open, conventional warfare. Not this subtle, horrifying siege. The human civilian fleet, brave as they were just transports, not battleships. They had no weapons to break a planetary shield. "There's only one way," Aelia finally said, her voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the hum of the embassy like a sharp scalpel, echoing with a terrible finality. Liam looked at her, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. He'd run the calculations, the nightmare scenarios, the impossible solutions hundreds of times in his simulations. "The project," he breathed, the name itself a heavy weight in the air, a burden of unimaginable consequence. "The Omega Protocol." The Omega Protocol was a forbidden concept, a phantom from humanity's darkest historical records, a last-ditch, desperate measure designed in their bleakest days, when they faced utter extinction on their home world. It wasn't a weapon for conquest, it was a weapon of absolute denial, a surgical strike of brutal force designed to prevent something infinitely, horrifyingly worse. It had never been used, never even seriously considered in a galactic context. To use it would be an act of unimaginable destruction, a scar on the very face of the galaxy, and a permanent, terrifying change to humanity's image in the eyes of all other species. It would make them monsters. "It will destroy Lyra Prime," Liam stated, his voice hollow, not as a question, but a grim, unavoidable fact. "The entire planetary body. It's not a surgical strike, it's an overload, a complete controlled demolition of the planet itself. There will be nothing left." Aelia nodded, her eyes filling with a profound, terrible sadness that squeezed her heart. She imagined the billions of lives, the vibrant cultures, the beauty of that world, all erased. "But it will deny the Vorlag," she said, her voice firm despite the pain. "It will deny them their prize, and it will open a window, just long enough for us to save what we can from the surface before it happens." The us was key, not the conclave, not the great fleets, but the humans. Their pack bonding, their fierce loyalty, their unyielding will to protect, would be pushed to its absolute horrifying limit. The plan was a massive, calculated bluff, a gamble on the Vorlag's own logic. The Vorlag, so incredibly good at copying and understanding, relied on predictable logic, known patterns, and established strategies. They could replicate any weapon, any maneuver, any technology that made sense to their analytical minds. But they couldn't copy the truly illogical, the purely desperate, the emotionally driven act of sacrificing an entire world to save its people from a fate worse than death. The Omega Protocol wasn't in any galactic military database. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a human secret, a terrifying ghost from the dark corners of their past, a last resort that no sane species would ever consider. The next few hours were a blur of grim, frantic preparations. Human engineers, their faces streaked with grease and tension, their muscles aching, worked silently on the few modified vessels that could carry the Omega Protocol's unique world-unmaking payload. These weren't warships, they were civilian frames, repurposed freighters and deep space tugs, their cargo bays now housing something that could unmake a world. Aelia sent a single coded message to the Conclave, bypassing all communication protocols, a final desperate warning that sounded more like a threat. We are initiating a last resort to prevent the subsumption of Lyra Prime. Stand clear, do not interfere, we are enacting humanity's wrath. The Conclave's reaction was immediate and explosive. Outrage, disbelief, threats of military action. Elder Thorian himself bellowed across the comms, his voice shaking with barely controlled terror and fury, demanding explanations, threatening immediate retribution, even calling for humanity's exile. But Aelia, her finger hovering over the comms cutoff, simply looked at the dying planet on the screen. There was no time for debates, no time for protocols, no time for threats. There were lives to save, even if it meant destroying a world. She cut the connection. The fate of Lyra Prime and humanity's soul was now in their hands alone. The Vorlag, completely oblivious to the desperate, terrifying human preparations, began their final phase of subsumption. On the Conclave's main display, visible across the galaxy, the sickly red glow around Lyra Prime intensified, pulsing with a terrible energy. The cold Vorlag voice, now layered with what felt like a chilling, arrogant anticipation of victory, broadcast across all open channels for the entire galaxy to hear. The transfer begins. The collective awaits. Resistance is futile. All life on Lyra Prime will become one with the collective. Your attempts to stop us are meaningless. Your conclave is weak. Then, the true horror began. Thousands of light years away, on the vibrant surface of Lyra Prime, tiny, barely visible pulses of energy flared. These were the Vorlag's remote connection points, initiating the process of incorporation. Screams, muffled by distance, and then abruptly cut off, reached the conclave displays, chilling every listener to their core. They were not just taking the planet, they were killing the civilians remotely, dissolving their bodies, harvesting their very essences, their thoughts, their memories, into the Vorlag collective. They were demonstrating their terrible power, confirming their absolute cruelty, showing the galaxy that they held absolute, untouchable control over the planet. Aelia watched, her jaw clenched so tight it ached, a single tear, hot and heavy, tracing a path down her grim, dust-streaked face. Her voice, though barely a whisper, was firm, decisive. "Now," she said, her voice cracking with the weight of the decision. "Initiate the Omega Protocol. Full power." Liam, his own face a mask of profound sorrow, squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, a silent plea for forgiveness for what they were about to do. He then nodded, whispering into his comm, his voice a low drone. "Targeting planetary core, override. Engaging primary conduit. Fail-safes overridden. Human crews, prepare for immediate emergency jump now." From the repurposed human vessels, thin, almost invisible beams of raw, destabilizing energy lanced towards Lyra Prime. These beams were not designed for explosion, not for direct concussive force, but for internal disarray, for a forced, sudden, violent molecular breakdown from within. The Vorlag, used to absorbing energy, to replicating patterns, to understanding any form of combat, were utterly baffled. They couldn't copy this. It wasn't a weapon in their understanding of warfare. It was an act of self-annihilation, twisted into a bizarre, horrifying defense. The brutal display of power began. The planet Lyra Prime didn't explode in a fiery burst like a typical warhead striking a target. Instead, its solid form began to shimmer. The vibrant blues of its oceans rickled, and then turned milky white. The verdant greens of its continents wavered, blurred, and then dissolved into a chaotic, swirling vortex of sickening color. The planetary core, destabilized by the Omega Protocol, became a runaway engine of self-destruction. The very ground liquefied, then vaporized into superheated plasma. The towering mountains rippled and flattened into glowing dust, then nothing. The vast oceans boiled away in a silent cosmic steam that vanished into the void. It was not an explosion. It was a controlled unmaking, a horrifying, elegant demolition of a world, atom by atom. The Vorlag ships surrounding it, caught completely unaware in the unexpected chaotic energy field of a collapsing planet, were not destroyed by force, but by sheer, unpredictable instability. Their shields flickered uselessly, their internal systems failed, unable to subsume or adapt to something so utterly illogical, so completely outside their comprehension. They didn't explode in glorious fire, they simply dissolved, their perfectly mimicked forms coming apart into nothingness as the planet itself became a violent, uncontained storm of raw, chaotic matter. The conclave chamber descended into stunned, absolute, horrified silence. Delegates gasped, shrieked, or simply stared, their minds unable to process the unthinkable act they had just witnessed. A planet, a vibrant, living planet, gone, utterly, unmade by humanity. The same species they had dismissed as weak, as talkers, as harmless, the compassionate ones. The same species that had just executed a planet-level act of brutal, horrifying, and utterly alien force. And then, the true horror for the Vorlag began to sink in. Their remote connections to the billions on Lyra Prime had been severed not by a conclave weapon, but by the utter destruction of their target. The incorporation they sought, their core directive, was denied, brutally, completely. The lives the Vorlag had just taken were tragically lost, yes, but the deeper, more terrifying subsumption of their minds and essences was blocked. The Vorlag had killed thousands, but humanity, with an act of cosmic surgery, had saved billions from an unthinkable, soul-destroying fate. They had sacrificed a pawn to protect the soul of the board. The moment the Omega Protocol reached its horrifying peak, even as the last remnants of Lyra Prime dissolved into a swirling cloud of dust and energy, the human rescue fleet, positioned at the very edge of the system, executed thousands of precisely coordinated emergency FTL jumps. They weren't jumping away from the destruction. They were jumping into the debris field, into the swirling radioactive remnants of a dead world. This was the final, desperate part of the bluff. The Conclave and the Vorlag would expect them to flee in terror from their own monstrous act. Instead, they dove headfirst into the chaos, their advanced sensors and modified transports working tirelessly, searching for any remaining life signs. Within hours, human crews, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion, their uniforms stained with ash and the residue of dying systems, were pulling thousands of survivors from the shattered life pods, from debris chunks, even from improvised shelters they had helped form within the Pioneer's hope before its final destruction. They worked with a furious, almost silent determination, their pack bonding overriding everything else, their fear, their sorrow, their exhaustion. They saved Zello's kin, Grix's species, Captain Fendra's people, and countless others. They didn't distinguish by species, didn't hesitate based on past insults. They just saved. They lost more ships, more brave humans, but they carried thousands, bruised, terrified, but alive, away from the dust cloud that had once been Lyra Prime. The Conclave was in an uproar, a boiling cauldron of fear, anger, and confusion. The human embassy was suddenly a focal point of intense, fearful attention. Elder Thorian himself called Aelia Rin to an emergency, closed-door session, his voice tight with barely controlled terror and fury. "Ambassador Rin," he boomed, his multifaceted eyes wide with disbelief and shock. What have you done? You have destroyed a planet, an act of such unprecedented violence. You have proven yourselves to be the most savage, the most unpredictable race in the entire galaxy. You are a threat to all of us." Aelia stood before him, her posture tired but her resolve unyielding. She didn't flinch. "We saved billions, Elder," she stated, her voice quiet but firm, cutting through his rage. "We denied the Vorlag their subsumption. They were taking Lyra Prime's population, not its resources. They were turning living beings into something unnatural, something horrific. The Conclave was paralyzed. You did nothing. We acted. This was not an act of savagery. It was an act of brutal, terrible necessity. They forced our hand by showing their ultimate cruelty, by seeking to erase what makes a sentient being alive. She then played the chilling Vorlag message again. The subsume, adapt, subsume, incorporate, echoing in the silent chamber, a stark reminder of the alternative. The conclave was deeply, violently divided. Some powerful factions, their voices shaking with fear, demanded humanity's immediate expulsion from the conclave, their complete isolation from galactic society. They saw humanity as a dangerous cancer, a destructive force that would shatter galactic peace and order. "They are a danger," cried one, "unpredictable, uncontrollable. They will be the ruin of us all." But a few others, especially the species whose kin had been saved, looked at humanity with a new, complex mix of awe and terror. They saw the devastating price humanity was willing to pay, not for conquest, but for protection. They saw the boundless depth of their pack bonding, even for those outside their species, and the chilling willingness to sacrifice everything for it. Humanity didn't beg for acceptance. They didn't apologize for the act, though the grief for the lost world, the billions of erased lives, weighed heavily on them. They calmly, logically explained their impossible choice backed by undeniable Vorlag data, showing the horrifying nature of the subsume process. Then, with the thousands of rescued civilians, now refugees, in their care, they did something else. They found a completely vacant planet in an uncolonized system, a lifeless rock orbiting a stable, nurturing star, light years from any known Vorlag activity. And using their unique ingenuity, their stubbornness, and their unyielding drive, they began to make it habitable. They poured their resources, their engineering brilliance, their sheer human will, their incredible capacity for teamwork into terraforming this new world, building cities, cultivating complex ecosystems, creating a new vibrant home for the displaced, broken species. They did it quickly, efficiently, tirelessly, with a silent, dedicated purpose. They named it New Hope, a defiant symbol against the despair of the Vorlag. The Vorlag, for their part, seemed to vanish. Their systems, designed to mimic and absorb, to understand and replicate, had encountered something they couldn't possibly understand, an act of such illogical, self-destructive yet terrifyingly effective violence. They had no data for it. Their cold logic broke. They were defeated not by bigger guns, but by a force they couldn't copy, couldn't predict, couldn't subsume into their understanding. Their silence was more chilling than any scream, a vacuum where their calculated advance once was. And so, the galaxy was irrevocably changed, scarred by the loss of Lyra Prime, forever marked by humanity's terrible choice. Humanity, once the perceived weakest, the best peace-seekers, the endless talkers, had, through an act of horrifying absolute necessity, become the most feared race in the conclave. They were no longer just diplomats, they were a force of nature, a living paradox of savage protection and boundless compassion. Isolated by some, admired by others, respected through a chilling fear, but truly understood by only a select few, they had paid a terrible, unthinkable price, sacrificing a world to save the very souls of billions. They had proved their brutal force, yes, but also the boundless depth of their pack bonding, a trait that both terrified and secretly awed the other species. They had carved out their own path, forged in fire and sorrow, a path that twisted away from the comfortable norms of the conclave. The conclave would wrestle with their existence, their place in the galactic order now fundamentally altered, forever tainted by the memory of Lyra Prime. The Vorlag were silent for now, their dark ambitions seemingly paused, but the universe was vast and full of unseen threats. New challenges would undoubtedly arise, perhaps from the desperate remnants of the Vorlag, or from other unknown horrors lurking in the dark. And humanity, standing on the threshold of this new, terrifying, and fiercely protected future, their reputation rewritten in blood and starlight, was ready. Their story, the story of the unexpected, the defiant, the terribly strong, had just truly begun.